Our next speaker is no stranger to sharing her stories with the GDC community. Here to discuss how her teams have found resolve and inspiration in stressful environments and how she has stayed optimistic and motivated through unforeseen challenges, please welcome Laura Lynn McWilliams.
Hi, I'm Laura Lynn, and I apologize in advance if I have to periodically take drinks of water like a politician while I'm talking. So, when I look at this group of people, I'm absolutely certain that I'm looking at people who feel a sense of purpose. Not just in being in this room or being a GDC, but a sense of purpose in being a game developer. And the reason I'm so confident about that, the reason I can state that with certainty that we all feel the drive, an urgency, a sense of purpose, is because if we didn't, I don't think we would have tools or be able to deal with all the bullshit that comes with this line of work. And there's a lot of it sometimes. So as of 2019, I've been a game developer for 25 years, is some of the games that I've worked on. But what was interesting was my very first professional game ever was canceled. And it closed down the studio that I started to make it. So welcome to game development. And then after that point, probably 1 out of every 3 games that I've worked on was canceled. And I've relocated long distance 11 times. So I've got some familiarity with some of the sacrifices we have to make to do this for a living. So I wrote that intro in 2018 when I first pitched this talk. And then when I opened this back up to kind of finalize it for this talk today, yeah, some stuff has happened. It's been a long 2019, and we're 3 months in at this point. And so I had to ask myself, am I really going to stand on stage in front of all of these people and talk about optimism right now? And the answer is yes, and I'll tell you why. Because optimism gets a bad rap. I think a lot of people think about optimism as, lemonade from lemons. They think about optimism as slapping a happy face on things that are terrible or ignoring the terrible things. But I can say, personally, that if I had just had a game canceled or part of my team laid off, and I encountered that kind of optimism, if I ran into that guy, I would probably slap that sticker right off his forehead. That's not optimism, and that's not what I mean. When I talk about optimism, I talk about the fact that life brings you changes and difficulty. You work through them, they change you, and you grow. For me, that's optimism. So just like some people say comedy equals tragedy plus time, for me, optimism and my optimism fuel is the knowledge that trauma is building tools for me. So I'm going to share some of those tools with you today, but more important, I reached out to a lot of developers, and I'm sharing their tools with you too. I asked developers between 15 and 38 years of experience, what gives you hope, what keeps you going, and what are the habits and structures that you've developed that you'd recommend to others? So let's get going. Optimism fuel number 1 is to remember your inspiration. I like to think of this as remembering the horse that you rode in on. You're a game developer for a reason. It takes so much work to be a professional game developer. Even if you have a degree, it's super hard to break in. Something gave you the drive to do it. What was it? When I asked Teresa what keeps her going, she says remembering why I got into games in the first place. To provide better experiences for the next wave of kids, to remember that gaming can be wonderfully creative, thought-inducing, connecting, and sometimes a disconnecting escapism away from a harsh reality. So a couple specific tips here. You need to remember what inspired you. This is some of the games that inspired me early in my career or before my career. There's some of the reasons that I felt like I had to make games for a living. You probably have your own list. Break them out once or twice a year when things get tough. Play them again. Remind yourself why you're excited, why you are here. And Gaurav has a great tip as well. Put the launch date of all your projects you've shipped on a calendar and celebrate those anniversaries when they come up every year. Reach out to old friends you worked with. Play your old games. Wear an old team shirt. Remember what you loved about those games. So, optimism fuel number 2. Never forget that this is a business. So, game development's kind of weird. I've gotten feedback several times over my career when I referred to players as users or customers. I remember people getting seriously bent out of shape a couple times when I called the game we were working on a product. Like that, the controller, that's a product. Our game, no way, right? And I don't think that's an accident. Our industry is heavily motivated by passion. And the thing is, the belief that it's all about passion. It's a big part of our hiring process, E3, PAX, GDC, all based around passion. And we kind of neglect this other bit. But I can tell you that passion is a two-way street. And in the hands of some employers and some leaders, passion is used as a rope that can bind us. So never forget it's a business. Don't let your colleagues or teammates or bosses convince you that this is not a business. You need your business hat on 24/7 when you're talking about your career. That comes to things like what company you choose. From Paul, learn the warning signs of band culture and how to identify them in an interview. If a studio seems interested in you only as a warm body, or to throw out a problem, or if you see people in leadership roles being disrespectful to their own teams, those are all big red flags. Don't take the bait. And from Anne, you work with people, not with IPs. You can chase after the passion project, but at the end of the day, what will make a project good is if you focus on working with good, decent, and talented people. Now, I'm not discounting passion. It's an important part of our work. If you're like me, you fall in love with every game that you work on, every game that you make. And that's important because love is what makes games great. As Dylan says, each game you make is the most important one. You might only get a handful in your career, so treat it well and make it the best it can be. But we all know from life that love leaves us open to heartbreak. A game you love is going to be canceled, or a publisher is going to give you changes that decimate it, or you're going to release it and no one's going to care, no one's going to listen, no one's going to buy it. Those things are going to happen to you. And you need to be able to come back from those things. You need to be able to stand up after them. Most important, you need to know when to hold and when to fold. You need to know how to walk away. And that goes for features and teams and companies as well. I think Forrest has great advice here. Brace yourself for change and instability. The industry changes a lot every few years. Jobs come and go. Sometimes opportunities dry up where you are. Sometimes you want to move to chase a new opportunity. Prepare yourself for these possibilities from day one, and you won't be surprised when they happen. So optimism fuel number 3, focus on creativity and craft. So over the years of game development, I realized I made an interesting shift from I make games I'm interested in to I'm interested in making games. And that's an important shift because I learned to focus on my craft. It became less important to me that I was making a game that I would, as a consumer, actually play, and more important that I was working on a game that challenged me and made me think about new things and made me learn in the process of developing it. And I think that that's an important switch. As Jennifer says, find something to fall in love with in whatever work you're doing. It's impossible to do creative work on demand if you're resentful or bored. No matter what your first impression is, find a point of connection with the work or with the audience, and build off that to fall in love with what you're creating. So another good tip, get a hobby. Seriously, it doesn't have to be inside, outside games, I don't care, just get a hobby. You need something that you can own, so when things are really difficult at work, you can come home and there's something you own that no one can tell you what to do with it or how to do it. It's absolutely yours. As Megan says, the phrase, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, is toxic BS. It's still work, and sometimes in order to keep being passionate about it, you have to step back and be passionate about something different so you don't burn yourself out. Stay open to learning, stay open to travel, find ways to embrace everything that life has to offer beyond games. Get out of the office. Do your research in things that are not about what you're working on. As Brenda says, I limit my research to stuff that fascinates me without regard to whether it will make it into a game. It usually does in some way. Optimism fuel number 4 is build from your mistakes and share them. You hear all the time, build from your mistakes, learn from your mistakes. I like to say, leverage your mistakes, because that's your gold. As you build experience, those mistakes that you carry with you are the things that enhance your companies. They make your work better. You need to share them with other people as openly and often as you can. As Jane says, actively find and face the things that make you feel like you're a total noob, and when you get through it again and again, you never feel old and certainly not stagnated. I love this tip from Teresa. Create an email folder titled Postmortem, and then put anything you learned or those big issues in it. At the end of the project, revisit this and be better next time. I'd never actually considered having a personal postmortem folder just for what I've learned on a project. Keep in mind that staying open to feedback is also a way of learning from your mistakes, and so are metrics, actually. And it's important to be open to feedback no matter how harsh it seems, and even to ask for it. As Brenda says, I surround myself with incredibly talented people who genuinely love making games, and I encourage them to give me direct, hardcore feedback. A lot of developers mentioned mentoring as another way to leverage their mistakes and also grow as individuals. As Gaurav said, being a mentor is a great way to get a new perspective on game development, bring a fresh energy into your daily routine, and use your experience to improve someone else's life. Or as Terry says, what keeps me going is mentoring and paving the way for young ladies who are up and coming in the industry. So, optimism fuel number 5, sync balance and rest. So use your PTO, people. Like, seriously. Every place I have worked, there have been a significant number of people who every month get that email that says you're at the cap. If you don't spend your email, you're going to lose it, and then they take that one day and stay just ahead of the cap. There are so many reasons why you need a break away from the office. Of course, one of them is health. As Anne says, the single biggest lesson I've learned, don't sacrifice your health to make a game. Years off our lives from stress or lack of sleep are not worth it. Or from Sandra, you may feel that it's more important to pour your soul into the game, to meet the deadlines even if you're crying tears of blood from exhaustion, and that vacation can wait. It can't. It's good for your physical and mental health, but also simply to renew your sources of inspiration. And that, I think, is the key point for me, is that creativity requires space. There's a reason that you might be struggling with a problem you need to solve all week at work, and then all of a sudden on Sunday you're driving or you're in the shower, or you're at a barbecue, and there's the answer. It's because your brain finally got the space away from the problem to noodle it over and figure it out. And that space is important in your daily life too, as Dan points out. Set aside sacred time each day to doodle and dream. Even after all these years, a hot cup of coffee, a nice pen, and a blank notebook are deeply inspiring. This is the heart of the process that I try to never lose. Number 6 is find a community. So yes, you absolutely need friends and family that you can lean on when things get rough. I don't know what I would have done without my husband over the years. As Terry says, I've always suffered greatly when I didn't have a support system to prop me up on days that were unfair, frustrating, or just plain dreary. Whoever it is, friends or family, make sure you have a set of healthy, supportive people there to share good and bad moments with. But I'd like to point out that you also need a game development community. It could be the people you work with now, it could be the people you've worked with before, but you need people who are going through the same things that you are. They need to share their mistakes with you, and for you to share your mistakes with them. If you're introverted or have been separated by distance, there's Slack, there's Skype, to find a forum. I love my game dev Twitter community personally, but you need to find that community somewhere. You also need to invest in the people that you work with. As Dylan says, invest in the people around you, your peers, your leads, and even your bosses. Include them in your life. The industry is small and tight-knit, and they might help your career many years later, even if you've moved on. Every relationship is important. And this especially moving bit from Tracy. What keeps me going is the support of my friends in the industry who help me stay connected. They've recommended me for jobs, moved me my stuff, watched my cat, and threw birthday parties I didn't know I needed. They hugged me when my world shrank and depression took hold. Number 7 is be the change. And I know it sounds hackneyed, but I really believe that we're all in this together. And the only hope we have for meaningful change in our lives, in our games, in our companies, in our industry, is for each of us to stand up for the things that we believe in, even when it's hard, and to also help our friends who are standing up. And I don't just mean this about social issues, I mean this about everything, how we speak to each other in meetings, how long those meetings are, how we develop the games that we're working on. All of these things require us to put our effort into making them better. And actually the effort of doing that, the act of making a difference, you'll find opens you up. My life has opened up tremendously since I started speaking at things like this, as hard as it is for me, because I feel like I have a better sense of purpose now. As Jen says, what keeps me going is knowing that I can make a difference to other people, whether it's connecting an IGDA member with a perfect mentor or a new opportunity, hearing someone talk about how a life experience changed their life, or a game experience changed their life, or having someone tell me how much they're looking forward to their next major anniversary in game dev. And now the last point, you need to discover and be willing to change your own path. I have a great quote from Christina, know your purpose. Knowing what drives you to develop and create games and revisiting and reflecting on that drive will give you the inner strength you need to make good decisions and overcome obstacles. Having a driving force means you always have a compass to guide you. So a lot of us are continually climbing that stair, right? The never-ending accomplishment stairs of game development. And it's bigger salary and better title and more prestigious company, bigger game, more sales, right? We're all on that staircase. So I'm going to take just a minute and tell you about my experience on that staircase to illustrate the point. So I loved all of the games that I worked on, every single one of them. But I wouldn't really call any of them mine. And it's not just because they were colossal group efforts, because they totally were. But it's because I was a commercial game developer. I made the game that the company wanted me to make for the audience we wanted to address with the IP that we had. I was never about expressing myself. It could not be about expressing myself because that would be the wrong thing for the game. The game needed to have what was right for the audience. So it meant I spent 25 years and I'd never shipped anything that I thought expressed me as an individual or as a designer. And I tried to get at that with side projects, but realistically, after giving 200% of yourself to game development during the day, you were too tired, I was too tired, and my brain capacity for game design was just exhausted. So it never got any traction, regardless of how important it was to me, which was very important. So in 2012, I got stage 4 cancer, and it changed my life. And even after that, I still didn't get any traction on this. And I really can't tell you why, but I just didn't. And then in 2015, I got lung cancer, still didn't get any traction. And then in 2016, the lung cancer came back, incurable, metastatic, and terminal. So I really was going to literally die and have never shipped a single game that I felt reflected me as a person. That was really hard. And I knew when I responded well to a clinical trial and maybe had a little bit more time that I had to make a change, or I was never going to fill this hole that was in my soul. And that's really how it felt. So if you remember this from the start, I am a design director at Microsoft, but I don't work on games. I'm the design director for Microsoft Stream, which is enterprise video software. It's like the YouTube for business. It's a fantastic product. I love the team. Really interesting design problems. Microsoft has a great work-life balance, and they very much encourage creativity. So now, when I leave work, I have the energy, I have the mental space, I have the freedom. I'm not under IP agreements. I can ship games that matter to me. I can tell my story for the first time ever. And it made me hesitate to even do this talk. For a while, I felt like, does this make me an imposter of some kind? Am I betraying game development by not doing it for my full-time job? But as I started to work toward this game that I'm actually going to ship, I realized, no, for the first time ever, I'm free. I can make whatever game I want to make for whatever audience I want to make. I'm an indie developer now. I'm still a game developer. I'm just a different kind of game developer. And I'm working on a paranormal romance adventure game with choice of games, which is certainly not something I ever would have shipped as core console developer. But I'm really excited about it. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because I want you to understand very personally when I say that life is short. You need to figure out what path is going to make you happy, and you need to do it now. Don't wait until you have a hole in your soul and you're looking at an expiration date and realize you haven't done the things that you need to do. So that's my optimism fuel. And when I reached out to developers to ask them, hey, do you have some advice, which, was very clearly going into a list of advice, I actually loved what Dave said, which is funny to me. Don't farm advice from pithy-sounding lists of good advice administered in a vacuum. Your situation is complex and unique, and good advice from one can be terrible for another. And I think that's true. But I can say that we all share two things, regardless of who we are. First is that we're game developers. And second is whatever your path is, it's going to get wrecked. And it's going to get wrecked multiple times. Game development will do it. Life will do it. And honestly, to be truthful, time does it anyway. Time changes all of us. It evolves our needs. It evolves our goals. So if I can leave you with one thing today, it's a challenge. It's for you to think now about what makes you happy, what will fill the holes in your soul. What do you need to do to be happy? What is your path? How are you going to express your unique story? What games are you going to make that tell other people about your story? Because I, personally, can't wait to play them. So thank you.